It starts with disrespect, ends with a lesson. A stooped black veteran brings his treasured uniform to a café. They see an old man taking up space. They don't see his rank, his medals, or the power he still holds. They'll learn soon enough. James Wilson sat quietly at the corner table of Elysium Coffee, his weather hands resting on a carefully wrapped garment bag. At 68, his once towering frame now curved slightly forward, years of command and combat etched into the deep lines of his ebony face. His plain brown sweater and modest slacks belied the man who once directed military technology innovation at the Pentagon. For 42 years, General Wilson had served his country with distinction. From Vietnam as a young lieutenant to Afghanistan overseeing drone technology implementation, he'd witnessed warfare's evolution firsthand. The Presidential Medal of Freedom and 3 Silver Stars spoke to his courage, but he was proudest of the technological modernization his leadership brought to the military. Though officially retired, the Department of Defense still sought his counsel on bridging the gap between Silicon Valley and military needs. Today, however, was personal. The Veterans Memorial Ceremony was just hours away, and inside that garment bag lay his meticulously preserved dress uniform, complete with insignia of a 4-star general. James sipped his black coffee slowly, taking care not to spill on the table. Despite his slouched posture and gray stubble, his eyes remained sharp, observant. The eyes of a man who'd spent a lifetime assessing threats and opportunities with equal precision. The cafe hummed with the energy of tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. James had chosen it for its proximity to the memorial, not his clientele. When he gently placed his garment bag across the empty chair beside him to smooth out potential wrinkles, he noticed a few glances but thought nothing of it. Mark Davis, CEO of Quantum Tech Solutions, entered with the confidence of someone used to rooms parting for him. 42, fit, dressed in a tailored Armani suit. He scanned for a seat in the crowded space. His eyes landed on James's table, specifically on the extra chair partially covered by the garment bag. "Excuse me," Mark said, voice clipped with barely concealed impatience. "Are you using all this space for yourself?" James looked up calmly. "Good morning. I'm just keeping my uniform flat before a ceremony. Would you like to share the table? I can make room." Mark's eyebrows raised slightly. "Uniform?" His gaze took in James's aged appearance and simple clothing. "What kind of uniform requires an entire chair in a packed cafe?" "Military dress uniform, sir," James replied, his deep voice steady despite the dismissive tone he'd encountered countless times before. "Military?" Mark scoffed softly. "Aren't you a bit senior for that claim?" James felt a familiar sting of prejudgment, but kept his expression neutral. He'd faced worse on battlefields and in Pentagon boardrooms. "Perhaps I could help you find another seat," James offered, beginning to rise with some effort. "No," Mark cut him off. "That's clearly too much trouble for you. But maybe in establishments like this, people should be more considerate of space." The emphasis on establishments like this hung in the air between them, its implication unmistakable. Several nearby customers glanced over, then quickly away. The barista behind the counter shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. James recognized the pattern. Bystanders unwilling to intervene in what was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. "I've been sitting here for 30 minutes, James explained evenly. "I'll be leaving soon for a Veterans Day ceremony." Mark placed his laptop case on James's table, claiming territory. "Look, I have an important conference call in 10 minutes. This table has the best Wi-Fi spot. Surely whatever American Legion gathering you're attending can wait. It's actually at Arlington," James said, his voice softening, "for fallen comrades." Mark hardly seemed to register the response. "That garment bag is taking up space for paying customers. Either move it or move yourself." James felt his heart rate increase slightly but regulated his breathing, a technique he'd taught countless young officers facing their first combat deployment. "I understand you're frustrated about seating, but I'd appreciate civil discourse." "Civil?" Mark laughed sharply. "You want civil? I built a company worth billions while the military wastes taxpayer money on outdated systems. Now you're wasting my time and space." A memory flashed through James's mind. standing firm during budget hearings before hostile congressional committees, maintaining composure when lives and national security hung in the balance. This was nothing by comparison, yet it cut differently. "I don't wish to argue," James said, "but I won't be rushed or bullied. This uniform represents service that deserves respect." At this, Mark's face flushed red. Respect? For what? Playing soldier decades ago? This is where real innovation happens now. In tech, not in your parade costumes. James straightened his posture slightly, a glimpse of the commanding officer surfacing. "Young man, I've witnessed more innovation in combat operations centers than most see in a lifetime. I've also learned when a confrontation serves no purpose." The cafe had grown quieter, conversations dimming as the exchange grew more heated. The manager, a young woman with a nose ring, approached hesitantly. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, eyes darting between them. "It's fine," James assured her. "Just a disagreement about space." Mark wasn't satisfied. "Actually, no. This man is monopolizing seating during peak hours. I think your paying customers deserve better consideration." The manager bit her lip, clearly torn between customer service and conflict avoidance. "Sir," she addressed James, "perhaps we could store your garment bag somewhere safe while you finish your coffee?" Before James could respond, Mark interjected. "See? Even the staff agrees you're being unreasonable." James took a deep breath. The situation reminded him of tense negotiations with tribal leaders in Afghanistan. Situations where showing weakness invited disaster, but where aggression would destroy any chance of cooperation. "I understand," James said to the manager. "I'll be finished shortly." Mark smirked triumphantly. Some people just don't understand how the modern world works. The military mindset, rigid, hierarchical, obsolete. James carefully began folding his garment bag, his hands moving with the precision of someone who had prepared for inspection thousands of times. As he did, the bag partially opened, revealing the edge of his uniform with 4 stars barely visible on the shoulder. "That doesn't look like a standard American Legion outfit," the manager noted with sudden curiosity. "It's not," James replied quietly. "I served as commanding general of the Army's Technology and Innovation Command before retirement." Mark rolled his eyes. "Sure you did. And I'm the Secretary of Defense." James continued packing, saying simply, "This uniform has been through more significant challenges than coffee shop disputes. It survived desert sandstorms, Pentagon politics, and battlefield conditions. It will survive this encounter as well." The absolute certainty in his voice gave Mark momentary pause. That pause was fleeting. Mark's conference call notification chimed, further agitating him. "Look, I don't have time for military fairy tales from someone who probably never ranked above private. If you served at all." He reached for his coffee cup, gesturing emphatically. "The modern military is a bureaucratic dinosaur anyway. You people can't even develop decent software without billions in overruns." The cup in Mark's hand tilted as he gestured, his frustration making him careless. Coffee, dark, hot, and plentiful, cascaded directly onto James's partially folded uniform. The liquid spread rapidly across the meticulously maintained fabric, soaking through to the metals and ribbons beneath. The cafe fell silent. James didn't yell, didn't jump up. His decades of crisis management took over. He simply stared at the spreading stain across what represented his life's work and sacrifice. "My God!" a woman at a nearby table whispered. Mark's expression flickered between surprise and stubborn defiance. That was unfortunate. Maybe now you'll learn to give adequate space to others. James slowly, methodically began dabbing at the uniform with napkins, his weathered hands trembling slightly. Not from rage, but from the precision of trying to preserve something precious. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" James finally asked, his voice preternaturally calm. "Spilled coffee?" "Hardly a national security crisis," Mark scoffed, but a hint of uncertainty had crept into his voice. James carefully rewrapped the damaged uniform. "Young man, in my career I've been shot at, negotiated with warlords, and redirected billions in defense spending. I've learned to distinguish between malice and ignorance. This feels like both." He stood with difficulty, his full height still impressive despite his age and stoop. Without another word, he gathered his belongings and walked slowly toward the door. As he reached the exit, a young man in a business suit who had been watching the exchange spoke just loud enough to be heard. That was General Wilson, 4-star, former head of Defense Innovation. Mark's face drained of color. 3 weeks later, Mark Davis straightened his tie in the elevator mirror as he ascended to the Pentagon's 3rd floor. Quantum Tech had finally secured a coveted spot, presenting their artificial intelligence defense solutions to military procurement officials. This contract could mean billions. His team of engineers followed him into the conference room, where various defense contractors were assembling. The room hummed with quiet conversation and the shuffling of presentation materials. A military aide called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chair of the Defense Technology Acquisition Panel." The side door opened, and Mark froze mid-breath. General James Wilson walked in, ramrod straight in a freshly pressed uniform nearly identical to the one ruined 3 weeks earlier. His 4 stars gleamed under the fluorescent lighting. The stoop that had been so prominent in the café was minimized by military bearing, though still visible. His face betrayed no recognition as his eyes swept the room. "Good morning." General Wilson's authoritative voice filled the space. "I'm General James Wilson, heading the panel evaluating next-generation defense AI integration solutions. Each company will have 15 minutes to present, followed by questions from our technical team." Mark sank slightly in his chair. The executives around him, who had no idea about the cafe incident, nodded respectfully. His team looked at him expectantly, unaware of the history between their CEO and the man who would judge their proposal. When it was Quantum Tech's turn, Mark approached the podium on unsteady legs. General Wilson's expression remained perfectly professional, neither hostile nor particularly welcoming. "Mr. Davis," the general acknowledged with a slight nod. "Please proceed with your presentation." Mark fumbled with his slides, acutely aware that the military officers flanking General Wilson were watching him closely. Every technical question from the panel felt like a trap, though they were entirely fair and relevant. When the presentations concluded, General Wilson thanked all participants with diplomatic neutrality. "The panel will evaluate all proposals based on technical merit, cost-effectiveness, and alignment with DoD operation requirements. We expect to announce our decision within 30 days. Mark gathered his materials, certain his company's chances were destroyed. As teams began filing out, an aide approached him. "Mr. Davis, General Wilson would like a word in private, if you have a moment." Mark's stomach dropped. He followed the aide to a small conference room where General Wilson waited, standing by the window overlooking the Potomac. "Close the door, please," Wilson said without turning around. Mark prepared himself for a justified dressing down. Or worse, a formal complaint that could damage his company's reputation throughout the defense sector. 3 weeks ago, Wilson began, finally turning to face Mark, "you demonstrated precisely why the technology sector and the military struggle to collaborate effectively." "General, I want to apologize for her." Wilson raised a hand. "This isn't about an apology. It's about a systemic problem. Silicon Valley values disruption, speed, individual brilliance. The military values procedure, hierarchy, collective effort. Neither fully understand the other." Mark stood speechless as Wilson continued. "Your AI solution is technically impressive. Our panel will evaluate it fairly, regardless of our previous interaction." "I don't understand," Mark admitted. "Why aren't you angry?" Wilson's weathered face softened slightly. "I've commanded young men and women in combat. When mistakes cost lives, you learn to distinguish between malice and misunderstanding. You also learn that retaliation solves nothing." He walked to a table and picked up a folder. "This is a proposal for a new military tech cultural integration program. I've been developing it for months, but our encounter crystallized its importance." Wilson handed the folder to Mark. "I'd like Quantum Tech to participate in the pilot program, regardless of whether you win this contract. Both sides need to learn from each other." Mark stared at the folder, recognition dawning that this was neither punishment nor absolution, but something more valuable, an opportunity to build understanding. 6 months later, Mark Davis stood before a mixed audience of military officers and tech executives in the Pentagon's conference center. Behind him, a slide showed the progress of the Military Tech Cultural Integration Program, now known informally as the Wilson Initiative. Our first cohort exchanged 20 personnel, Mark explained, tech specialists embedded with military units and military officers working within Silicon Valley companies. The results have been transformative. In the front row, General Wilson nodded approvingly. Though still stooped with age, his presence remained commanding. Quantum Tech hadn't won the initial contract, but their participation in the program had led to 2 smaller, successful defense projects. After the presentation, Wilson approached Mark. "You become quite the advocate for military-civilian understanding." Mark smiled ruefully. "Amazing what you can learn when you stop assuming your way is the only way forward." Wilson chuckled. "That's a lesson I've taught young officers for decades. Sometimes it takes a coffee stain to drive it home." As they walked together toward the reception, Wilson added, "By the way, I still have that uniform. Never could get the stain completely out." "I'm sorry about that," Mark said sincerely. "Don't be," Wilson replied. "I keep it as a reminder that sometimes our most important lessons come wrapped in humbling packages." As they entered the reception, officers and executives mingled freely, speaking each other's languages, building bridges across cultures that had seemed incompatible just months before. Not perfect understanding, perhaps, but a beginning founded on mutual respect. What defines respect in today's society? General Wilson's story reminds us that true dignity isn't found in titles or uniforms, but in how we respond to disrespect. His journey from coffee-stained humiliation to creating lasting change represents the best of military values: resilience, strategic thinking, and leadership through example. Have you, or a veteran you know, faced misjudgment based on appearance? How did you handle it? Share your stories of respect earned or lessons learned in the comments below. Your experiences might inspire others facing similar challenges. Subscribe for more powerful stories that bridge understanding across different worlds.